to talk about Niners and Rams, who, this is a matchup that has favored Kyle, with the exception of the single biggest game in this matchup since Kyle and McVay became head coaches in the NFC title game. With all that is the Rams coming up on the horizon, and with the Heat in town, and with some Lakers questions, we're very happy to welcome back from ESPN Radio down in L.A., Jorge Sedano, one of our favorites. Let's just start with how's the back, brother? I heard it went out a couple weeks ago.
Oh, man, it was brutal. And then, of course, I'm an idiot. That should be doesn't need to be said at this point. But nonetheless, I am an idiot, even more so than I thought, because a week later, I'm feeling okay. It's still probably like 75%. And my kids are like, Dad, can we go shoot some hoops? And can we hit the ball at the ballpark? And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Whatever. Like, I'm fine. And about halfway through that, I started to regret it tremendously, because then it lasted about another week because I just kind of re-injured myself. But other than that, I'm great now.
The aging process, freaking relentless. She truly is.
But I will say this. You have just realized that you've been given your free out the next time the kids want to go out and play and you don't want to. And if you don't use that roughly 200 times a year, they'll never believe you again.
So at least you got that going for you.
Yeah, it's a chronic injury now, kids. That's the reality of it.
So, look, let's just start with the Rams, who are, like the Niners, not off to the start that I think a lot of people expected them to start with. Cam Akers, what the hell happened there? Explain it to me.
It seems like him and Sean McVay just were not on the same page by any stretch of the imagination. And look, this is just hearsay at this point, so it's not me like with a firm, hard report. But there's plenty of rumblings about this that Cam, that is, and him didn't see eye to eye just based on things like preparation, how serious he was potentially taking the game plan. That stuff is out there, so it's not like I'm, giving out government secrets. But from what I've heard, that sounds right, that they just were not seeing eye to eye on how serious he needs to take the game and the game plan from a week-to-week basis.
Well, they're not your secrets to keep, so I'm glad you blurted them out. But beyond that, how long was that a problem? Because he did seem to last a long time on that roster after his position as the lead running back seemed to fade.
Yeah, look, that first rookie season, he kind of came on the scene and burst out quickly, and then unfortunately had the injury issue that next offseason. They needed him in their run to the Super Bowl. They needed anybody they could get their hands on at that point, just because they wanted some semblance of a running game. He came back sooner than anticipated, which I thought, first of all, was an incredible athletic feat, number one, but I did question how smart that was for him personally. And I don't know if that played a factor in it at all, because it does feel like going into this season, it never felt like he really regained the explosion he had previously. And again, no one was expecting that to be the case when he came back in the postseason run. But certainly this year, I think people felt like, hey, well, we'll see the Cam Akers of old, who we saw as a rookie, really make an impact. And that didn't seem to materialize either. So I think that he lasted that long just based on just the initial impression. And I think because they really felt that he was an athletic phenom, and I think they gave him every chance to try to kind of work through whatever issues they had.
Jorge Sedano here on 95.7 The Game. So based on Cam Akers' declining stock, how hard were they knocking on the Panthers' door for Christian McCaffrey? And what do you think of the haul that the Niners ended up giving to get that deal done?
Well, I know they were definitely knocking down very hard on that door. And it basically boiled down to an extra fourth-round pick, I believe, that the Niners gave up. And I guess the Panthers really had no interest in Cam Akers at that point either, because that was also part of the equation. And if I recall correctly, that really was the difference between the two offers that were put on the table for the most part. And, yeah, look, I think as far as the Niners are concerned, I'm a big believer in you give what you got to give up if you feel like you can win it, because the windows in professional sports are so freaking small, and they're always smaller than we even anticipate. So I think because of that you have to go for it when you have a chance. And I think the Niners did what they needed to do. Like, I had no issue with what they gave up.
Is there a level of irony in the fact that the Rams don't get Christian McCaffrey because Les Snead valued a fourth-round draft choice too much?
I would imagine there is some irony to that for sure. But I do think, though, while his strategy is F them picks, I think at some point you don't want to be like a worse version of the Mike Ditka Saints who gave up a whole draft for Ricky Williams, where you may not have any picks at any point. So I think that they need to kind of stock the cupboard a little bit. And they've done a nice job when they've actually had picks to make. So it is fascinating that they do not value them the way they do. But, again, it got them a Super Bowl, so I guess at the end of the day, it's all worth it.
Hey, George, we're going to get a version of the NBA Finals that might have been in the multiverse with the Miami Heat in town to take on the Warriors tonight. Warriors got valued at $7 billion, my goodness, from Forbes today, putting them in front of the Knicks and Lakers, really the only other team that has ever knocked the Knicks and Lakers off that one line in the last 20, 30 years in terms of NBA valuation. It's amazing how the Warriors' fortunes have risen to just an ungodly level. And at the same time, a team that you're also around all the time in LA sees the Lakers, obviously retaining franchise value, but my goodness, their 0-4 start is about as helpless an 0-4 as I think we see in basketball.
Before we get to the Lakers, though, can we just all agree that while Chase Center is really nice, the real reason they're valued at $7 billion is because of Raymond Ritter, right?
Raymond will tell you that for sure.
Their PR man extraordinaire.
You need something from him, don't you?
What's that?
Ray asked if you need something from him, because this is a good way to go about getting it.
No. I texted him the other day. Funny story, quick side note. So my 8-year-old daughter is starting to really get into basketball. And so I said to her, last year, I'm like, so are you going to pick a team to root for? Because my wife grew up here in LA. She's a Lakers fan. I obviously grew up in Miami. I have a lot of long relationships with the Heat. And she's been to a bunch of, Laker games and Heat games over the years in different cities and here in LA. And we're sitting there watching the Warriors Suns, and she goes, Dad, I think I've made my decision. And I'm like, what is it? She's like, I want to be a Warriors fan. I'm like, all right, cool. We'll rock that. So it's funny. I did send Raymond a text, and I said, you have a new fan. So I said, next time I'm at Chase Center to do a game, we may have to put an extra seat between you and me. So he thought that was great. But to answer your Lakers question, this thing's a mess, man. Like, there's really no other way to describe it. And people can blame LeBron for the Westbrook thing, but that's now a year ago. Okay? Like, you had a chance to just erase that mistake in some way, shape, or form. And they chose not to because they wanted to extract more value out of the transaction. And whether you believe that Kyrie was really on the table and Joe Harris was really on the table or not, look, I happen to think that there probably was a moment in time where they didn't think Kevin Durant was coming back to the Nets and that thing was going to completely implode. And the Lakers might have had an opportunity and they didn't pull the trigger, right? And then there's obviously the Indiana deal with Miles Turner and Buddy Hield. And Indiana, and anyone, by the way, is going to exact what I like to call the Lakers tax and say, hey, you got those 2 picks. You want to get rid of Russ so bad? You need to give them both to us. And I get not wanting to give up 2 first-rounders for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, particularly Miles Turner because he's a free agent next year. And, Buddy Hield's a nice player, but it's not like he's some sort of difference maker. So they're between a rock and a hard place, man. And Rob Pelinka has done a really bad job this offseason. They went from an AARP team last year with all the old guys to an AAU team this year where it's just too many young guys and not enough shooting in a sport that's evolved to the point where you need that spacing on the floor. And they don't have any of it, and they're doing it at historically bad proportions.
Let me ask this, since you brought up Rob Pelinka. How much freedom of action does he really have as the general manager there? Or is it a matter of too many spoons in the pot?
So, Ray, there was a time where I feel like he had autonomy, or at least enough autonomy where he could kind of position himself the way he wanted on specific moves. I think now, and he's actually said this openly, where they're a collaborative situation there. And I get him in this situation saying to himself on any of these moves, saying, wait, if I'm the only one that's willing to give up both these picks for whatever it is we want to deal for, I'm not putting myself on that island, because if I'm on that island, I'm the first one to get, pushed into the water and fed to the sharks. So I get it, self-preservation 101. He doesn't want to go against the grain. But unfortunately, no matter what, he's going to be the person that's going to be on the chopping block, because they already used Frank Vogel as a meat shield and got him, pushed out the door when, look, and I like Darvin Ham, but I don't think it was Frank Vogel's fault that they were bad last year. And he's now the next in line. He has put a bullseye on himself after Vogel got dismissed. So that's the situation. And to elaborate even further, Ray, I know that Sam Amick wrote this recently in The Athletic, that the younger Buss brothers, Joey and Jesse, who have run the G League team and also run the draft for them for many years now, have kind of gotten a larger voice in the room. And if I had to guess, and this is just purely speculation on my part, they probably have some say on those draft picks that they haven't given up.
Jorge Sedano covers the NBA for ESPN down in L.A. doing radio, but as he said already, he knows the Heat like the back of his hand all the time he spent in Miami, his original hometown. With the Heat here tonight, let me just ask you, what do you think the Warriors are looking at? Because this is a Heat team. Bam hasn't exactly come out of the starting blocks the way he wanted to. Kyle Lowry had a good game last night as they sent Portland to the loss column for the first time this season. Duncan Robinson, hard to find, getting minutes for him right now. What do you think Eric Spoelstra's biggest concern is stepping into a year after overachieving so much last year?
I think that they're trying to figure out what they've got, particularly at the power forward position. And Caleb Martin had a nice game yesterday, and I think they like him. He certainly was a really good player for them off the bench last year, good defender, shot the ball well, can get to the basket. He's a nice role player, especially at his price tag at $7 million. But I don't know if he's a starting power forward, and I don't know if they know if he's a starting power forward, but they're going to kind of play that for now. And I think they're just kind of trying to see what they have with the rest of that roster. Can these guys continue to elevate? Can Tyler Hero elevate more? And offensively, he has, but can he defend, which is really what they need him to do? Can Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, and those type of guys, can they take their games up another notch? So far, Strus looks like he has. And, Gabe's played all right. He's played to kind of his norms. And can Bam take another leap? To your point, that hasn't been the case. He kind of got a lot of garbage points at the end of the game yesterday. But the other thing is they haven't played kind of their style of defense, which they've been known for basically since Pat Riley was there, started there in 1995. At least the first couple of games, you didn't see that. You did see it last night. They seemed to defend yesterday. So I think between that and just kind of Kyle Lowry getting, I guess, more acclimated to the situation. He had moments last year in the regular season where I thought he looked great. So I think they're just still trying to kind of figure it out. And they drafted this kid in the first round, Nikola Jovic, not to be confused, obviously, with the two-time MVP, who they threw out there for a couple of minutes yesterday. And he looked like what you would think a 19-year-old would look like, a little bit like a chicken with his head cut off. And kind of running around. He picked up 5 fouls. But despite all that, he didn't look terrible, and he certainly can space the floor, and he's a decent ball handler for a guy at 6'10". I think they like him long-term. I'm just curious to see if they give him more opportunities during this road trip. But I just think ultimately, back to my original point, they're still a team kind of feeling it out a little bit, and that's kind of always been Spo's way. He likes to tinker those first 15 or 20 and then kind of settle into something.
George, good to talk some NBA with you. I know you're going to be back on our TVs tomorrow night. We got sideline for Pelicans Suns. That's a sexy game, man. I mean, it really is. That should be an up and down game. Is Zion feeling good? Is he going?
He's questionable right now, and I agree with you. On paper, it should be fantastic, even despite the fact that Brandon Ingram is out with a concussion. I still think the Pelicans are really, really impressive. And the Suns, a lot of chatter about are they going to fall off, all the stuff that happened after that Game 7 against the Mavs. I was there for the game against the Mavs on their opening night, and that was pretty electric stuff there in that second half, and they obviously did a nice job against the Warriors the other night.
Yeah, they just put the beating on them pretty good. When are your duties bringing you back to Chase? Do you know that far ahead in advance?
No, I do have you guys on the road in Phoenix, though, in a couple of weeks. But I don't have anything, at least. We have our schedule through the first week of January. And all I got was a preseason appearance at Chase this year. So I don't know. I don't know when I'll be back, hopefully after the turn of the calendar.
Maybe you stop pestering Raymond Ritter for stuff, and maybe you get in more often.
Maybe he's got more pull than I do at my own shop, as far as getting those assignments. So,
George, when you do get back up here, let us know in advance, man. We'd love to see you.
Will do, man, for sure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. George Sedano, ESPN, one of the nice guys out there in a world where not everybody who works in sports is a really good guy. Sedano is a really, really good guy.